All right, so let's take you back to KwaZulu-Natal now. That's where the 46th Summit of SADC Heads of State and Government is currently underway at the International Convention Centre in Durban. SABC News anchor Oliver Dickson is in Durban for us and joins us live. Oliver, very good afternoon once again. So as we continue to unpack Cyril Ramaphosa's speech, I mean, one of the things that he said is that people who live in the SADC region really need their leaders to deliver economic liberation. And in the last hour, you also spoke about how that was essentially, top of the agenda. How well do you think that that speech resonated as, it also happens amid, in his own words, slow transformational progress?
In fact, I did a count. President Cyril Ramaphosa had used the word deliver and implement or implementation collectively 9 times in that speech that he delivered earlier. He seems to have lamented the pace at which African leaders are implementing the things they are meant to be delivering on collectively across the region, particularly on things like regional integration. But there were some highlights there, and I want to focus on one of those right now. And that is that the region, and this was mentioned earlier as well by the Executive Secretary, Elias Mokgosi of Botswana, that the region has been able to mitigate food insecurity by 16%. And this is a population across the 16 member states of nearly 400 million people. I want to bring into the conversation to unpack just that and some of the plans coming out of those closed sessions pertaining to that specific question, which Vincent Magwenya told us earlier on, the president's spokesperson, which Vincent Magwenya told us earlier on is a priority to President Cyril Ramaphosa. But before I bring in Veli Okamp, I want to remind you exactly what President Cyril Ramaphosa said to this specific point. Take a listen at this.
President Ramaphosa got the SADC Summit underway this morning, speaking about inclusive growth, peace and stability within SADC member states, and speaking about an integrated growth approach for all SADC member nations, speaking about infrastructure development, with South Africa assuming the chairpersonship of SADC at this point in time. We are joined by the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Mr. Ronald Lamola. Just a summation of what has transpired so far within the SADC Summit.
Yeah, thank you very much. As you have already said, the President has opened the summit. The Executive Secretary has also outlined. We will now be going into the closed sessions where we are going to make decisions in relation to the issues that they have outlined on SADC regional integration, intra-regional trade, issues of infrastructure, special projects, issues related to energy and electricity power pool, and also issues related to peace and security.
When you look at issues related to peace and security, particularly around economies, if these member states of SADC don't get their economies and development growing within their countries, you are evidently going to have a migration issue. How are you going to drive this particular issue of economic growth using infrastructure in order to grow the economies of these countries?
Yeah, infrastructure is a backbone, and the key issue that will be discussed is the North-South corridor from the Durban Port, Richards Bay, up until the DRC, including the one-stop border post, Libombo, and all the one-stop border posts that we're developing, but also the ones in between Zambia and Zimbabwe, and between Zimbabwe, Zambia, and the DRC, and all those that have got a regional impact in terms of economic trade and growth, but also issues of export beneficiation, not of raw materials, but of beneficiating the few minerals that we have in the SADC countries. We have identified about 10 of them that we believe can drive regional industrialization and manufacturing. And this meeting now, the closed session, will look into details into that in terms of how that should be done and how can that be enhanced.
Mr. Lamola, last one from my side before hogging the space for my colleagues. On the issue of beneficiation, in your previous life as a youth, you've been speaking about this issue of beneficiation. But 15, 20 years on, there's been no beneficiation, particularly around these minerals within the African continent and in SADC. Road dust is being exported, which means secondary economies are being exported to European and Asian markets.
Yeah, but South Africa has now taken this matter to another level. If you remember, it was one of the outcomes of the G20, where all the rich countries have agreed to invest into the African continent for beneficiation at source in the global south. And also this is now an outcome of the African Union, which we made sure it does happen. And now is now going to be the outcome of this SADC regional meeting, where all the countries in the SADC region can be able to say, out of these 10 strategic minerals, this is how we should move about in terms of beneficiation. And that's why issue of electricity and energy becomes very key, because you can't beneficiate anything unless you have got energy security, you have got enough power to power the plants, the factories, and so forth. So that's why it becomes a key platform in terms of the energy power pool of SADC. So this meeting will deal with that, will also delve into those issues, and decisions will be made.
That is Minister Ronald Lamula, the Minister of Department of International Relations and Cooperation within South Africa, speaking about South Africa's priorities in the chairpersonship of South Africa for a year of this particular Southern African Development Community, SADC, saying that President Ramaphosa is going to anchor it around economic growth, particularly looking at infrastructure development within African member states, looking at peace and stability, that ultimately with economic growth, it does have an impact and a ripple effect in dealing with the issue of migration. Manufacturing, which was one of the biggest sectors within SADC, and in particular between South Africa and Lesotho, which had some of the biggest manufacturing plants when it comes to the textile industries, is another diminishing particular aspect of the economy within SADC. That this particular chairmanship of South Africa of SADC is going to look at increasing the manufacturing capabilities of the SADC region.
Well, Vali Okamp is with us now. He is the Minister of Agriculture, well, the newly Minister of Agriculture, previously having served as the Minister of Environment. Vali, food insecurity is a big conversation. It's one of the things President Ramaphosa mentioned right at the top of his speech. It's one of the things mentioned also by President Emmerson Mnangagwa in his handover speech, as well as by the Secretary, the Executive Secretary, Mr. Elias Morosi. You're sitting here as the Minister of Agriculture, dealing with foot and mouth disease in South Africa, but also coming off of the back of Namibia and Botswana, neighboring countries of South Africa, having only recently lifted agricultural import bans on South Africa, right? For instance, one of the things was the Botswana banned was potatoes. We couldn't export potatoes to Botswana, right? And of course, there's the benefit of AGOA being extended. So it's a mixed bag of things happening at the moment. What are you being tasked with to operationalize, to ensure that the momentum gained on overcoming food insecurity is maintained and accelerated?
The most important thing is that we must all realize that we as SADC countries are in this together. Whatever South Africa is going to face with regards to agriculture and challenges, the rest of SADC will face. So climate change is one of those issues. We've got an El Nino effect coming to us, and farmers are going to face severe droughts. But it's not only South Africa that will face that. It will be the whole SADC region that will face that. So collectively, we've got to stand together. We've got to assist each other. And that is one of the primary tasks, is to see how we can collaborate to make things easier for each other. We've got new innovation, for example.
Can I ask that, Vili? And it might be a little bit, before we get to seeds, I think that's quite important, but it might be a little bit of an unfair question to you, given that this happened earlier this year. But when we had an El Nino earlier this year in the southern eastern parts of the region, it impacted Zimbabwe, Limpopo, as well as Mozambique. Many farmers had their crops wiped out at the time. Many of those farmers are financially on their knees right now and have to build back up. Were the key lessons that were learned in January this year that had to be discussed here in terms of just that disaster preparedness to ensure that food security is not eroded?
Well, the occurrence earlier this year was due to flooding. The long-term El Nino effect that we're going to go in now is with regards to droughts. So with regards to the flooding, we saw the havoc that it reached throughout the southern parts of South Africa, in Limpopo, in Mpumalanga, as well as in the Western Cape. We saw what the effects thereof is. We've got to make sure that infrastructure is built back better, so that water that goes away from farms, that goes into water pipes, all those type of infrastructure needs to be there. But the long-term problems that we've got is not the short-term flooding that we've had in January. It's the long-term drought due to El Nino that we are now going to face. So, for example, we can't expect farmers to yield the same results on their farms in drought times as they did in normal rainy seasons. So we've got to use innovation. One of the things that is there is innovation in seeds. We now have seeds that are more drought resistant, that you can plant in poorer soil conditions and it will still give you more or less the same result. We've got to share that innovation. We've got to make sure that our neighboring countries also got that, so that when these droughts hit, and they're going to hit, there's no doubt about that, that they will also be better prepared. We cannot isolate ourselves as South Africans and think if we are fine, that's all right. As a region, as a SADC, we've got to be fine because we need stability in the whole of the region. And one of the big things worldwide that creates instability is hunger. We cannot let our neighbors and people in SADC go hungry. So we must work together. We must see how we can share knowledge and share experiences so that we can get through the challenges. And I'm only talking about El Niño now. There's other challenges as well that we need to collectively take on.
How many of your counterparts in the region have you met with over the last few days or since you've come into office to discuss exactly these sort of collaborative efforts, particularly around drought-resistant seeds as an innovation of agriculture?
I'll have to count, but I met with the Minister of Agriculture of Lesotho, of Mozambique. I've had discussions with the Minister of Agriculture in Namibia. So we are busy with those talks. There are several of the countries that are here. Unfortunately, not all the agricultural ministers are here. It would have been nice to have some more bilaterals. But I mean, those are ongoing talks. The discussions that we in Mozambique, for example, had is the effect that floods have on them. All the rivers that goes from west to east in this country goes through the Kruger National Park. You can start on top with the Limpopo River and you can go to the elephants in the Letaba and Sabi River. All that water eventually goes into Mozambique, which is a very low-lying country. And we've got to see how we can work together and cooperate with each other. So there are a lot of issues, Oliver, that we need to take hands on. Whether it's floods, whether it's droughts, whether it's seed innovation, there's a lot of issues that we can and should take hands on, and we are doing that.
So do we have a culture of collaboration in the region? Look, I saw a culture of collaboration in January at least when Mozambique, South Africa, particularly the authorities in Mpumalanga and Limpopo, were working quite closely with the authorities in Mozambique. Similarly, the authorities in Limpopo working quite well with the authorities in Zimbabwe, specifically around the collaboration on managing the floods, right? The floods devastated Mozambique worse than it did South Africa at the time. But do we generally have a culture of collaboration on those granular stuff across the continent, across the region, the sub-region, really, that would make what Minister Okam's now saying a success for us?
Yes, indeed, there is collaboration. Take, for an example, during the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, South Africa is a more developed country with capacity. The President of the Republic was appointed by the African Union to be a champion on health matters. And he was able to rally the region to ensure that there's a synergy in terms of addressing the challenge of COVID-19, because we even share the borders, and therefore movement of people could simply lead to infections, and therefore there was collaboration. But also South Africa has no choice but to collaborate with the neighboring countries. Our economy is benefiting a lot from the neighboring countries. We are the industrialized country. We manufacture goods. We manufacture machinery. Where do we export those goods? We export those goods mainly in the region. If you can look at trade between South Africa and Mozambique, Mozambique is our largest trading partner. Simply put, we are collaborating with them. Do you remember the launch of the Maputo corridor? Today you see this traffic coming down to Durban here at the harbour. It's because of that kind of a project. And therefore there has been collaboration. We just have perhaps to ensure that it's not skewed in favor of South Africa. The Minister of Botswana was telling me, I don't know how far true is this, but I trust him, that with the foot and mouth disease, Botswana did help us with vaccines. Therefore, you see there's
Yeah.
collaboration.
In fact, on that, Vili, foot and mouth disease didn't just ravage South Africa alone, right? Some of the countries in the region are infected. In fact, the cross-migration of livestock across the border between Lesotho and South Africa has been part of what has been ascribed as part of what's been spreading foot and mouth disease. Is there any sort of collaborative conversations happening with neighboring countries in the region?
Well, that's precisely what my discussion with the Minister of Agriculture in Lesotho was about. South Africa has, from our side, also provided 50,000 doses of vaccines to Namibia, Lesotho, as well as Eswatini, so that should there be outbreaks, they can fight back on those outbreaks. We are working together. Just to come on and add on to Mozambique. Mozambique is our largest trading partner on the continent, but it's our fourth largest trading partner worldwide, and it's right on our doorstep. Mozambique's success is reliant on our success, and vice versa. We need to expand our exports to our SADC countries. We saw how geopolitical situations in the world had an effect on what our farmers in this country make and profits that they make and the difficult circumstances under which they make them. We must diversify. I'm going to China on the 7th and the 8th of September to sign an export protocol on cherries from South Africa to China. It will be the first time that we export cherries to China. What a huge, large market for our farmers that's opening up there. But it will also be great if we can export more of our products to our local neighbors. It's cheaper. It's high quality products, but we cannot only export, we must also share knowledge, we must share experience. With regards to the foot and mouth disease, Oliver, it's very important that we take hands. This disease does not see an international boundary. It just goes over it. We know that there's a huge traffic between South Africa and Lesotho of cloven-hoofed animals. And we've got to look that reality in the face and say, okay, how are we going to overcome this? And I must say the cooperation that we had from Lesotho is great. The discussions between our veterinarians and theirs, I've also had discussions with the veterinarians. They are highly knowledgeable. They can assist us. They know what the situation is in their country. And collectively, we must win this battle. If we are going to fight this on our own, we'll never win it. And if me as minister is going to fight this on my own without involving the private sector, I'll never win it. We all got to work together. As we did with COVID, we've got to fight this fight with foot and mouth disease.
Yeah, well, hopefully you don't get sued by, Sake Liga and the likes as you take on that fight.
Well, it's precisely due to one of the court cases that was there that we came and sat around the table and say, how can we win this? Again, no single agricultural organization, not the department, no single farmer, no single country will be able to sort this out if they try to stand alone. We've got to cooperate and work together. I think if you look at the sentiment in the market, especially under cattle farmers, it is very good. I can give you an idea. Up to the end of June, there was 13.5 million foot and mouth disease vaccines that came into the country. Since the 1st of July up to now, and then looking forward to the end of August, there will be roughly 10 million vaccines coming in this 2-month period. So the vaccine rollout is really gaining a lot of momentum. And that is precisely what we need if we're going to win this fight. Working together, the private sector must bring in vaccines, the distribution must be quicker, and the vaccinations itself, the putting vaccines into animals, due to the fact that our farmers can now do that, that rollout will also be much quicker. So I think we saw the collaboration of various aspects coming together to make this a success.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that. Really do appreciate it. Vili Okam, the Minister of Agriculture, talking to us there. Very specifically on the pillar around food security and overcoming that, which is part of the SADC Vision 2050, but also part of Agenda 2063, both being referenced earlier on in President Cyril Ramaphosa's speech there. We'll continue with our coverage here. Do stay with us, but for now, it's back to Auckland Park.
Well, thank you so much, Oliver. That is SABC News anchor Oliver Dickson.